all of you share certain traits. Obviously, you're passionate about growing consumer brands. Every one of you, whether you're running a brand or whether you're helping to run a brand. And there's a good reason you're passionate about this. American consumers will spend more than $14 trillion on goods and services this year. That's 68% of gross domestic product, and it's by far the largest component of GDP. The American experiment and democratic capitalism globally depends on brands, and it depends on the uplifting, edifying, stimulating, value-laden goods and services you create. Those of you who've seen me at other conferences know that I had a long past as a political reporter covering legislative, regulatory policy, various other things. I'm very passionate about the role of business in the American experiment. So that's one of the reasons I'm so happy to have you here today. Now, you're even more passionate about your company and your teams and the products that you're bringing into the world. Why? Well, because there are few activities more personally energizing than assembling a collective of men and women, successfully pursuing a mission, and creating jobs and wealth and happiness along the way. Most of all, the trait you share is you're passionate about serving, about locating a community, identifying and fulfilling its needs, putting people in touch with each other, and translating those faceless statistics known as consumers into flesh and blood human beings whose lives you elevate each and every day. Now, how can I claim to know you with such confidence? I don't want to turn you into a science experiment, but I and my IAB colleagues have been studying you for years. Beginning in 2017 and then going public the next year with our groundbreaking study, How to Build a 21st Century Brand, IAB has aimed, and will continue to aim, to be the world's foremost authority on brand creation, brand evolution, and brand growth. Why are we doing this? It's not because we're giving up on our historic stakeholders, the publishers and the technology companies that founded the IAB, a nonprofit trade association, and who continue to animate us. We're doing this, we're diving deeply into the data, exploring the strategies, and identifying the tactics that are sparking brand growth, really for the most basic reason imaginable. Every IAB member company and each one of our stakeholders either is a brand or it serves brands. Often, as in the case of premium publishers, you're doing both at the same time. I just want to kind of explain this really simply. I mean, think about it. You're a Disney. You're a brand. Well, you're also serving brands because on your Disney network ABC and now on your Disney network Hulu and others, you're selling ads that help brands grow. So you're a brand, you're serving brands, or you're both. And every brand on earth today is being disrupted or is a disruptor or, frankly, is both at the same time. And brand disruption has never been easier, and brand growth has never been harder. We have published about 1,000 pages of primary research. Actually, when we add the research that we're going to unveil today and tomorrow, it'll be about 1,000 pages over the past 2.5, 3 years. And in that research, IAB has shown that in virtually every consumer-facing category, growth is flowing from the longtime incumbents that have dominated for 30, 40, even 100 years to an aggregation of new-to-the-world startups. We call you all quarter-point disruptors. And often you're too hard to see individually, but collectively you pack a real wallop. The stories are legion. In 2018, for example, total US personal care and beauty product sales grew 4.5%. It's way above GDP. Online personal care and beauty sales grew 24%. Now, at the entire other end of the size spectrum, meaning I'm comparing kind of a thing of eyeliner to a sofa, digital sales now account for 1/4 of all the money spent on sofas and beds and chairs and tables. And that's in a furniture market that is otherwise, no pun intended, flat. Burrow, fast furniture startup, has been growing by 20% a month So now, in the real world, nobody would ever really compare cosmetics to sofas. Those are two different industries. IAB's breakthrough discovery is that companies like Burrow in furniture and Glossier in cosmetics, Warby Parker in eyeglasses, Away in luggage, Mack Weldon in men's underwear, more than 3,000 companies we've identified in the US alone, these are actually in the same industry. We call you direct brands. Direct brands create value through low barrier, capital flexible, leased or rented supply chains. We call this the stack your own supply chain. Value extraction is accomplished primarily through the direct relationships between the company and its end consumers. Direct brands have evolved out of, supplanted, are competing with the indirect brands that have dominated for decades. Indirect brands created value based on dominating owned and operated, high barrier, capital-intensive supply chains. They extracted value through a series of third-party handoffs from a brand to a publisher and ultimately to a physical brick-and-mortar retailer. IAB's point of view is that all brands have no choice but to become, in some part, pretty much a large part, direct brands. Why? In a flat, low barrier, easy to enter, promiscuously available supply chain, in a world where basic access to consumers is not constrained by expensive gatekeepers, consumer brands must develop and build direct, data-enriched relationships with their end consumers. Nike said this explicitly last week when it announced that it was ending its sales pilot with Amazon. The company said, and I'm quoting here, Nike's focus will be on elevating consumer experiences through more direct personal relationships. The lessons we have learned about the direct brand economy over the past several years are quite straightforward. All brands are in the content business. All brands are in the experience business. All brands are in the service business. All brands are in the retail business. All brands are in the data business. And all brands are in the relationship business. Now, what I just said was pretty easy to articulate, but both God and the devil are in the details, and the details are hard, which is why, dearly beloved, we have gathered you here for the next 2 days, and that is to learn the details from the masters and from each other. We're going to roll up our sleeves and learn how to help our brands grow. We're going to learn how to improve our capabilities. We're going to learn how to create new partnerships, and we're going to learn a lot of other new things at the same time. Our first best way of learning new things, as I've suggested, is from each other. So to that end, I'd like to tell you about yourselves. For the second year in a row, we have conducted a survey among Disruptor brand founders and leaders so we can learn more about your hopes and dreams, your visions and goals, your strategies and tactics, the teams you're deploying, the value you're getting from them. We also wanted to learn the things that keep you up at night and also the things that put you to sleep with a smile on your face. The 2019 IAB Founders Benchmarking Study is substantially larger than last year's. We sent the survey to the leaders of about 3,000 companies in the United States. We heard back from 203 of you, compared with 36 last year. We believe this survey comprises a reasonable cross-section of the most advanced direct brands in the United States, as realized in our ongoing IAB 250 research. I think most of you know about the IAB 250 by now. We've been using hard data from Dun & Bradstreet, CB Insights, and about a dozen other data sets. We cull through with them more than 290 million business records to find the top-tier companies that are driving growth and innovation in the direct brand economy. It's not easy to do. Overwhelmingly, your companies are privately held. Overwhelmingly, you're small. The records are hard to put together. but our goal is really to use the IAB 250 as kind of the Fortune 500 of brand disruption. The companies whose executives responded to the 2019 Founders Benchmark align closely to the IAB 250, so it gives us a reasonable degree of confidence that we're getting a pretty good cross-section of the direct brand economy. The companies in the survey are roughly the same size on average as the IAB 250, between 17 and 18 million in dollars in revenue annually. Most have under 250 employees. About a third employ subscription models. So all this is really consonant with what we've seen in the IAB 250. Virtually all of the survey respondents, 97%, are founders, CEOs, presidents, or C-suite executives. About half of your companies are small, fewer than 20 employees. One thing that leapt out, and for those of you who are at the Women's Leadership Breakfast, this is just one of those facts I like really putting out there. There are more women leaders in our survey than in the IAB 250. But no matter how you cut the data, there are vastly more women leading disruptor brands than there are women leading companies in mainstream corporate America. There are 24% women leading companies in the IAB 250 versus 6% in Fortune 500 companies. So let's give women leaders a big round of applause for driving economic growth in this country and the world. Almost 2/3 of our survey respondents are millennials. That's unsurprising because if we look at other research, nearly 1/3 of DTC brands are targeting millennials as their primary market. You're appealing to who you are. Survey respondents' companies are disrupting every consumer-facing category, from apparel to alcoholic beverages. I wish I could do an A to Z there, but apparel was first and alcoholic beverages was last, so there you are. But you're disrupting everything. Your companies are at the vanguard of a small business revolution. More than 2/3 of your companies boast fewer than 100 employees. And most of you are pretty much just starting out. If we use financing as a proxy for that, more than 40% of the respondents in our survey are at the first or second rounds of financing. About a quarter of you have either taken your company public, sold to a public company, or if you're still privately held, you consider your companies mature. So it's also interesting because while we're talking about a small business revolution, we're also talking about a substantial portion of it that has matured into something bigger and growing with access to public markets. As young as you are, and perhaps because you're small and have so much upside, growth among DTC disruptors is very, very robust. Survey respondents say that their companies grew top-line revenues 40% between last year and this year, and they're anticipating another 33% growth in 2020. These are the slides that I want you to take photos of or take notes on, because this is why it's called a benchmark. You're going to benchmark yourself off of this. I know it. And the people you're asking for money are going to benchmark you off this. So this is worth kind of taking shots. This is all available on the IAB site as well with a lot more detail. So if you forget to take your phone out, it's easy to access. Now, as tiny as disruptor brands may be, they're also terrific little businesses. 90% of the survey respondents reported that their companies are profitable. On average, they achieved profitability in only 3 years, and they boast gross profit margins of 48%. Now, that's kind of exactly the point. These contemporary brand builders differ from their cousins in the earlier internet era. And I'm thinking here of ad technology companies and various other companies that really were the kind of animators, hey Jack, animators of the internet economy for a good portion of the past 20 years. You know, they tended to build, I'm caricaturing a bit, but not so much, they tended to build for a quick flip, and they favored, and their financiers favored, such KPIs as penetration and share. Direct brands, by contrast, are focusing on profits, They're focusing on customer growth, and they're focusing on new customers. So for those who are thinking that this is just another bubble in the internet wave of 25 years, you got to think again, because those of you who are starting consumer goods and service companies are starting with a different premise and pursuing different goals. You're also different from your internet cousins, earlier internet cousins, in another and very surprising way. You are not sellouts. Only 15% of you say your goal is to be acquired by another company. This was a big surprise to us. Our hypothesis was different. We didn't think that this would come out last on the list. The vast majority of disruptor brands say that you're building for the long term. Your models are not the serial entrepreneurs that dot the ad tech landscape. Start a company, sell it, start another company, sell it. Rather, your models are the William Proctors and James Gambles who built institutions to last, and last for 130, 150, maybe 200 years. Where do disruptor brand founders come from? Where did you learn the craft of brand disruption? Well, for those of you in the room who are at big incumbent brands, the Procter & Gambles and the Unilevers and the General Motors and the you name it, look around you at your next internal business meeting, because chances are there's a disruptor sitting next to you. More than a quarter of all founders come from the industry they want to disrupt. We think this is good news for big brands. If you can keep your talent and engaged internally, they might choose to disrupt from within rather than go to the outside. On the other hand, it may not make that much of a difference, because when we asked the question, whom are you disrupting, we found our biggest surprise in reviewing this year's data. Given how many disruptor founders emerged from the industry they're trying to disrupt, you'd think they'd be champing at the bit to go after the big, lumbering Goliaths that taught them the ropes but kept them tied to convention. But that's not the case. If business competition is warfare by other means, this turns out to be a digital-on-digital war. By a 2-to-1 margin, disruptor brand executives say they're competing more against Amazon, Wayfair, and other digital retailers than they are competing against incumbent brands in their own category. Perhaps even more surprising, by almost the same margin, disruptor brands say they're more focused on competing against other direct brands than against large incumbents or against large retailers. Who is financing this digital-on-digital race to the top of consumer brand disruption? Our IAB 250 research had indicated that venture funding was less prominent among DTC disruptors than it's been historically in core internet industries. But this year's Founders Benchmark deviates from those earlier findings. The larger data set indicates that VC financing is still eagerly sought by a 3-to-2 margin. In part, that's because venture funding appears to equate, or at least correlate, with higher company valuation. And it also appears to be the readiest source of cash to grow the business. Venture-funded companies are significantly more likely to be profitable and larger than non-venture funded companies in our study. But therein lies a bit of a paradox as well, because third-party funding is also the source of pain. Between 1/4 and 1/3 of the founders we surveyed say that various financing schemas created trouble for them. Most likely, we think, it's the loss of some form of control over the enterprise. Melanie Travis, who is, I think, was definitely here today. I don't know if Mel, if you're in the room. But Melanie Travis, who is the co-founder of Andy Swim, told us this is what she learned about raising money.
I think advice on fundraising for a D2C company would be focus fundraising efforts on folks that believe in direct-to-consumer and that already have a thesis in that category. I see a lot of founders waste time with investors who do like SaaS enterprise, and they've got like a leggings company. And no matter how good their business is, the enterprise investor is just not going to invest in the leggings company. So focus the fundraise.
As I said up front, the clearest way to understand how and why the direct brand economy is so different from the indirect economy that preceded it is to take a full supply chain view of the enterprise. As a general historic observation, from the advent of the Industrial Revolution through the middle of the 20th century, companies achieved defensible primacy in their industry by dominating various functions in their supply chain. For example, they would benefit enormously by locking up sources of supply so nobody else could get to them, or by owning their own wholesale distribution mechanisms, or by gaining most favored nation status with key retail partners. Direct brands are very different. As a general rule, you own very little. Your hallmark is flexibility. You access, as I mentioned before, what we call the stack your own supply chain, a set of broadly available leased or rented resources. You can rent your supply. You can rent your distribution. You can certainly partner on retail. This allows disruptor brands to assess and internalize the data that they're getting back from the marketplace and move more rapidly to introduce new products and adapt existing products and to serve end consumers. We asked founders a number of questions about their supply chains and the advantages they are seeking from them. The findings are very striking. Most notably, direct brands are simply faster than incumbent brands in reacting to market trends. In a 2012 study, the Boston Consulting Group found that best-in-class consumer goods companies, best in class, could bring a new product from ideation to market in 15 months. On average, all consumer goods companies took 22 months to bring products from ideation to market. By contrast, more than 3/4 of the founders we surveyed said their companies could go from an idea to market in 6 months or less. A third can do it in 2 months. So best in class, 2 months versus 15 months. Average, 6 months versus 22 months. Very big difference. Just listen to what Haim Dabah, the founder of Kidbox, told us about the speed factor.
I would say that we literally change every week. For example, some of our customers said, hey, I'd like to create our own box. So we created Build Your Own Box. We given them outfit to pull together and kind of create their own box. We got that feedback from a customer. Literally 3 weeks later, we had a simple, minimally viable product to kind of have the customer build their own box. And now a lot of customers are building their own box. In this business, you need to be very, very agile.
This need for speed has animated direct brands' use of third-party logistics providers, 3PLs for short. It's a shorthand that everybody in this room knows. What you might not know is that 3PLs have actually existed for hundreds of years. There's nothing new about the existence of third-party logistics. What is new is the growth of 3PLs. And in recent years, it's been nothing short of remarkable. 3PLs have gone from a compound annual growth rate of negative 5.4% in 2014 to a projected 6% annual growth rate, far beyond GDP, in 2022, in no small part because of consumers' demands for new goods in more places, more timely than ever before. Another massive distinction between direct brands and incumbent brands is your prioritization of customer service. It is the number one area among DTCs for people investment. It far outweighs such vogue investment areas as data science and research. This is another area where it's really worth contrasting it with incumbent brands. Disruptors are twice as likely to prioritize customer service as incumbents. There's a twice annual CMO survey conducted by Deloitte, Duke University's Fuqua School of Business, and the American Marketing Association. In the last iteration of the CMO survey, it found that only about 17% of mainstream companies say customer service is a top investment priority. This customer service gap, really a 2-to-1 customer service gap, may be the biggest fault line for big brands. In a relationship-driven economy, where these first-party consumer relationships and the data they provide are the central asset of the enterprise, incumbents are simply underinvesting relative to upstarts. I think that big gap, it's something we're going to be looking at over the next 2 days. We have workshops on it. It's also going to be a key area of ongoing research for the IAB. Importantly, for direct brands, service is a two-way street. It's not just something you do for your consumers. It's a very direct way that you use to engage with them and learn from them. For example, here's how Lively built how and why Lively built what they call their ambassador program.
We built an ambassador program that is really about human interaction and connection to the degree that we now have 80,000 women in our ambassador network in the United States. And so those women tell us everything. They vote on products. They tell us where we should open our pop-ups that now became stores. They are the lifeline of the company. And these are actual customers, women, and lovers of the brand. So they are brutally honest with us. And that type of information is what allows us to move forward and understand where to go next.
There's an equation here that is a little bit hard to articulate. I'm going to do my best. It's that community equals service equals information equals growth. Community, service, information, and growth. And if you do a contrast with just the history of big brands, and you go back to that schematic which shows these third-party handoffs ending in a third-party retailer, you come up with the startling basic fact that historically big brands did not know and did not have access to their end consumers. Therefore, they could not create communities of them. Therefore, they couldn't serve them directly. Therefore, they couldn't get information from them directly. Therefore, they couldn't use that information to grow. This is a very big contrast between brands through history and brand disruptors today. Now, as important as customer service is to direct brands, it's not the most challenging talent to find. The greatest challenge, the hardest talent to find, and this also surprised us, is on marketing and advertising talent. 26% of you said these are the most difficult roles for you to fill. Why did it surprise us? Well, partly it's because we work in advertising and marketing. We're surrounded by advertising and marketing people all the time. Kind of think, how difficult can it be to find them? But then we started boring in, we do the qualitative interviews, and in interviewing founders, we now think we understand why this is such a troubled area to find the absolute right people. Marketing and advertising in the past were largely a function of managing two things. I'm caricaturing here, obviously, but those two things are managing a mass media budget and managing a creative product that's overwhelmingly overseen by third-party agencies. With luck and experience, together, these two factors would equate to short-term sales lifts and longer-term pricing control. Sounds simple, actually, but it wasn't. It was hard to be a successful CMO. In today's direct brand economy, budget and creative remain deeply relevant, but ongoing, consistent, persistent growth is the lifeblood of the business. Direct brand marketing and advertising talent must be steeped in the old disciplines of creative and finance management, but it's also got to have expertise in the new disciplines of acquisition marketing and lifetime value growth, which historically were not part of the overall remit for marketing teams. Here's what Christina Carbonell and Galen Bernard, the co-founders of Primary, told us about marketing and marketing talent.
I think what we feel most strongly about is that you can't outsource strategy. And so As an example of that, we don't outsource our marketing. We have an amazing in-house team here that manages our marketing. A huge part of growing a business like this is to navigate how to drive growth. And to do that, there is a ton of test and learn, and also the creative part of it is so important to it being successful, and we know the brand and what we want to say about it and how we want to present that better than anyone else. And so we have purposely kept all of our marketing in-house in terms of marketing talent as well as creative and copy, and they work together as a team to develop our marketing and to experiment.
Finally, we want to explore one of the bigger questions disruptor brands are facing as you grow and as you mature. Where are your consumers? Where are they finding you? And where are they buying your goods? We'll go through this in more detail when we unveil the Media and Acquisition Strategy Study tomorrow morning. That too, largest study ever conducted on media and consumer acquisitions by disruptor brands. But in our Founders Benchmark study, we were struck by how distinct and diverse shopping and buying have become. Back in the day, broadly speaking, again, another caricature, but still one that kind of hits home. Back in the day, there were really only two places a company could sell and a consumer could shop. That is, there were two places a brand could make its products known to consumers and consumers could discover products. You could discover products through advertising, or you could discover products in the store. That's it. Buying itself, meaning the actual choice a consumer makes and the consummation of that choice, took place in one place only, the brick and mortar store. To put that in perspective, in the mid-1990s, 97% of all retail sales in the United States took place in brick and mortar stores. That history is long ago and far away. Omnichannel selling and omnichannel buying are now the new normal. While social remains the largest exposure channel for disruptor brands, followed by search and display advertising, actual consumer purchasing is spread more evenly across channels. Put another way, what this chart shows is that shopping and buying have largely been decoupled. Stores today are as much for experiencing as they are for actual selling. Now, brick and mortar retail is down to about 83% or so of all retail sales in the United States. Probably less than that when you remove the largest retail outlets. Anybody know what the largest retail outlets actually are? It's gas stations, number one. But when you remove kind of gas stations and restaurants from the mix, there's probably even less of that taking place. Brick and mortar retail is not going away. It's still going to be the majority, I think, for most of our lifetimes. But it's still been eroding relative to that historic norm of the high 90% for many, many years. We anticipate that brick and mortar will continue to remain relevant to shoppers, but at that diminished rate we're seeing among upstart brands. Selling and experiencing are also happening digitally, with fulfillment of the sale increasingly occurring through direct-to-consumer deliveries. Even though more and more disruptor brands are moving into brick-and-mortar spaces, it's inaccurate to say that you're maturing into something that we might call conventional companies. It's far more accurate to say that you're reinventing the shopping experience for omnichannel consumers in an omnichannel world. That's what Stephen Kuehl, the co-founder and CEO of Burrow, the fast furniture company that's growing 20% a month, told us.
We always knew that having a physical space would be a big part of our strategy. Early on, we partnered with other companies and we put our sofas in their stores and showed people where they could go try it out, but you don't really get to own that experience. So we were really excited to open up our first retail store in Soho. Retail is going to be a huge part of our strategy, and because we are a direct-to-consumer brand, we have the benefit of not having to hold inventory at the store. So we can open smaller locations and do more of them, which are then more profitable because we don't have to have, a giant warehouse of furniture sitting there so that people can take it home, because it just gets delivered to you really fast.
The question of omnichannel selling is one of the driving issues at this Direct Brand Summit. We'll be hearing from executives at J.Crew, Mattress Firm, and other giant retailers about their new partnerships with disruptor brands. We're going to be hearing from even more direct brand founders, on their expansions into new channels, brick and mortar and beyond. But it's impossible to address this topic without mentioning the elephant, or at least one of the elephants in the room, and that's Amazon. Last year, in the benchmark study that we did with founders, we learned from the founders that Amazon was just another channel. Wasn't a competitor, just another channel. This year, with more evidence from a larger set of respondents, we discovered that Amazon is more of a classic frenemy. More than half of disruptor brands say they are not selling on Amazon, and 29% say they don't even plan to. Why not? Well, in the qualitative interviews, the answer was pretty clear. Control of the end consumer relationship and the derivative data is the overwhelming reason. But look at the flip side. 45% of founders say that Amazon is a primary sales channel and a powerful revenue source. 20% of their revenues for those who are using the world's largest digital store. Now, we hypothesize that as more of the largest brick and mortar retailers look to disruptor brands to appeal to their own next generation of consumers, data access will be a major point of competition. And retailers will be trading access to data for access to their shelves in many different ways. And that this is going to fundamentally disrupt the way trade promotions have been done over the past 30, 40, 50 years. So look for changes in the trade promotions relationship between brands and their retail channels. I wanted to save the best for last, identifying your next biggest opportunity. Drum roll. Well done, well done. Lee, I can always count on you for a drum roll. Thank you. Here it is. It's the world. Almost 80% of the founders in our survey said they're not selling outside the United States. But if you go back to that earlier slide, you'll see that going global is one of the highest priorities for disruptor brands. Now, the world is a big and complicated place. Competition by disruptor brands isn't as easy as it is in most places as it is in the US. Direct-to-consumer delivery is not as advanced in many countries as it is in the United States. But the world is also a very fertile place. Brand disruption has become a fact of life throughout Asia. We're seeing DTC brands make significant inroads in food and beverage categories, apparel categories, grocery categories in Latin America. So as a final word, I'd like to say to you, and actually say to the entire world, look out world, you're about to be disrupted. So thank you for being here. You're going to learn a lot more about this over the next 2 days. There are going to be workshops on all these topics. As I mentioned, this research, all the research is available on the IAB website. As always, we want you to be engaged with us. We have mic runners throughout the room in here today, and our breakout sessions will leave plenty of time for Q&A. We want this to be as dialogue-rich as possible because we, as I said, we want to learn from you. We want to learn from each other. Please also engage with us on social media. We've got the hashtags there. The Wi-Fi information can be found on the screen behind me. I also encourage you to download the event app for more information about our program, as well as the relevant research from the IAB. Also want to take a minute to tell you about our next event, the IAB Annual Leadership Meeting, which takes place in February in Palm Desert, California. This is IAB's flagship event, brings together more than 1,500 executives from across the ecosystem for 3 days of learning, networking, business development. The 2020 theme is the new alphabet of consumer experience, and it'll discuss the next wave of disruptive technologies and the ways they're transforming modern consumer experiences. So for all the brands and all the partners in the room, this is actually essential because we're going to be doing deep dives on the progress and evolution of what used to seem pretty far out, AR, VR, AI, voice, but are now with us and are in fact changing the way we relate to our environment in our homes and outside our homes. So if you want to figure out where your consumers are going to be next year, IAB ALM is the place you're going to find it out. More information can be found at the IAB membership booth located outside this room at the top of the stairs. Now, all of the brands in this room, by the way, have automatically been entered into a drawing to win a round-trip airfare and hotel stay to attend ALM. I'll be announcing a winner at the end of each day of the event, so stick around. It's the one point I'll be the most popular person here. And for those of you who didn't know, for brands, you are now welcome to join the IAB. IAB, as I mentioned, was founded by publishers and technology companies. About a year ago, the board voted overwhelmingly to welcome brands into our membership. About 70 brands have already joined the IAB despite no real membership drive. So this now officially begins the membership drive. We were welcoming both disruptor brands and incumbent brands. And here's the best selling point. A brand membership is free at least through 2020. We're waiving dues for at least 2 years. Why are we doing that? Because brands are the top of the food chain. And so we figure having you around is going to benefit everybody else. So join us. You'll get a lot of value out of it. Among other things, you're either already wrestling with how to comply with the California Consumer Privacy Act, or if you're not, you better be, like really soon, because it comes into play on January 1st. Well, the IAB is the place that's developing compliance solutions for the California Consumer Privacy Act and is in the weeds on the new federal regulation that's coming down the pike on consumer privacy. It's something all of you need to know about. IAB also does the technical standards underlying such things as the RTB, the auction-based pricing system, video distribution delivery. We also do primary research on consumers and brands like this. So you would have access to all of that, plus the brand council. So go to the booth, sign up. We'd love to have you. You'll get my email, my phone number. You can call me any time of day or night, honestly. For more information, including a list of benefits, please visit the IAB Member Center on the second floor gallery. And last, but certainly not least, I want to give a huge thank you to our platinum sponsors, Google and Hulu. Thank you, G, and thank you, H. I want to thank our premium sponsors, AdRoll, ALC, Belardi Wong, Digital Remedy, Epsilon, Facebook, Outbrain, Publishers Clearinghouse, Pinterest, Roku, Simulmedia, Tatari, and Wondery. Hi, Hernan, the CEO of Wondery. And I want to thank our VIP sponsors, our title sponsors, and our supporting sponsors. We can't do things like this without sponsors, so thank you all very much.